I want to. I'm going to show you how I start it and work on one sleeve now, and then in our class in a couple weeks I'll do the other sleeve. Typically I do both sleeves at the same time, and I do that because I am very forgetful and it's the best way for me to make sure I have two matching sleeves. I will be using a counting thread as I do this sleeve to help me make sure that my second sleeve matches the first sleeve. And I will be moving my counting thread each time I do a decrease, so I know how I can make that second one match. Now, if you recall, when we were casting on these stitches at the underarm, I put a marker not before or after a stitch, but right around the stitch. And I put that marker right around the stitch because that is my middle stitch. And that's where I'm going to start now. And it's very clear, if you can, I hope you can see this all right. The middle of that stitch, here's the stitch, both sides of the stitch here. So I'm going to start by putting my needle smack dab in the middle of that. And I'm going to take my yarn. I'm going to leave a decent sized tail in case I need to sew up any ends or anything like that. And I'm going to pull that through. Yep, sure I am. This is why you don't take the marker off until you get that stitch done, because things fall off. Here we go. All right, so make my loop, pull this through. Now I'm going to go to the next stitch, which is right here. See how I've got the line of stitches right here? And I'm going to go smack dab in the middle of that stitch. Now, if you recall, for my size, I had 9 stitches that I cast on. So I'm going to be doing 5 stitches here and then 4 stitches when I come around on the other side. So now that's 2. Then I'm going to go in the middle of this one. 3, go in the middle of this one, and you'll notice I have the cast on loops above my needle. I'm not going in the cast on part, I'm going in the stitch below the cast on part. So there's the first stitch, 1, 2, 3 more, so that's 4, and then this one is going to be the 5th one right there. All right, now here are my stitches that were on the thread from my yoke. The problem we always have is there's a huge gap between where I picked up this last stitch and where this stitch is. You've got this little bit of fabric here. Part of it is because these stitches are tighter, so the gap here is the thread from here, and part of it is you're changing directions. You're going across and then up, and you get this weird little space. So the first thing I'm going to do is take and pull these first 2 stitches. So I don't know if you can see that, but by pulling this stitch, I tightened that up. So that space is just a little bit smaller. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make a stitch, and I'm going to make the stitch right in here. This is not science. This is just me saying I've got a stitch here and I've got a stitch here, so I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. And when I go in, I'm not going to just pick up one loop, but I'm going to go in where I'm in between the 2 stitches. And by doing that, I'm not creating another hole. Now, after I do that, pick up that extra stitch, I'm going to put a marker in here. And when I come back to knit the next round, I'm going to knit these 2 stitches together, and then that puts me back to my original stitch count. So I'm not putting extra stitches on here, but what I am doing is just picking up and making a stitch, which then when I knit it together, it's going to close that little gap that's there. All right, now what I'm going to do is start at the other end, And I'm going to put all of these stitches that are on my lifeline here. Let me pull this out. And I'm going to very quickly just slide these stitches on here. Now this is one of those where if you use that stitch saver, the cording, you could just put that end on here and just pull it right through. So you can see how I'm just picking up these stitches as we go. Sometimes if your stitches are tight, you could use a smaller size needle. I don't typically do that even though they are tight, and I don't do that because I want these stitches to stretch out to their original size before I start knitting, so that I don't have this little mark there where the stitches are smaller as I'm knitting the rest of my sweater. I want to stretch them to be their normal size. All right, let me finish picking up these stitches and I'll be right back. All right, so I picked up the rest of the stitches all the way around, and I put a marker in the middle of where those stitches are because my cable is longer than the sweater is, so I'm going to need to do my sleeve as a magic loop. So I have 70 stitches on my needle, which means I have the marker at the 35 stitch mark right here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull this through so that only the cable is in the stitches, and then I'm going to pull my yarn out. I like to pull the yarn out after I put the stitches on the cable, because by doing that it's not as tight, so it comes out a little easier. So I'm just kind of pulling it out. There we go. And then I'll use this pink yarn for my counting thread as I go. All right, so now back to where I'm at. Here is my middle of the sleeve, basically the top of the sleeve. So I'm using my marker to pull it, and I'm just going to pull this end through like that. So now I have it set up so I can knit it as like the magic loop. All right. These 5 stitches that I've picked up are going to be the beginning of the front needle. So I move things around. I've got my 5 stitches here. I've got 35 stitches here. I've got 35 stitches here, and when I get around to the other side, I'm going to pick up these stitches here. Now, I'm saying I have 5 stitches, but I actually have 6. But I know I'm going to knit these 2 together because that's my that's where I did the extra one to close that hole. So now what I'm going to do is I've got this here, got this here. Give that a tug. And now I'm going to start knitting these stitches. Now, remember how I gave this a tug to pull it tight? Well, I'm going to give it another tug again now to pull it tight to help close that gap in there. So that's there. But then I'm also going to pull the next couple stitches. I'm going to give a tug also so that it evens out that threading that was in there. And you can see I might have a little bit of a hole here till I get done. And if I do, when I'm all finished, I will close that up. But for now, that looks a whole lot better than the big gap that had been there. All right, so let me knit across until I get to the end of what's on my needle, and I'll show you picking up the rest of the stitches. I'm not done with that round, but I did get to where I'm finished with that needle, and this is the marker that was in the middle of my sleeve, which is basically now at the top of the shoulder. I'm taking that marker out. I don't need that anymore. It was just there to help me get everything situated. All right, so now I'm doing the magic loop, which means I'm going to take both of my needles, and I'm going to just take it and turn it so that instead of facing to the left, everything is facing to the right. I'm going to take the front needle and push it in. I'm going to make sure that my yarn is up between the 2 needles, then I'm going to take my back needle, pull it out and around, and now I'm going to knit till I get to the end of what's here, and I have to pick up my stitches to fill in the gap. All right, I'll be right back. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, I've got 3 stitches left on my needle to knit. And I'm going to do as I had done with the beginning, and I'm going to pull this last stitch so that I'm tightening the gap between the stitches. And I'm going to work that little bit of excess down to these 3 stitches so it's even. Now I'll knit those. And if you remember on the other side, the last thing I did was to pick up an extra stitch in the gap between where I'm going to start and where I'm ending. So if we look at this, here is the first stitch, and remember I'm going to pick up 4 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, here's 4. So the gap is right in here. So I'm going to come in here, and again, I'm not going to just pick up 1 thread, but I'm going to pick up the 2 threads. I'm basically going to go in this opening right here, and I'm going to knit that extra stitch. And again, I'm going to put a marker there to remind me that I want to knit that stitch together. All right. Now I'm going to pick up my 4 more stitches. And again, if you look at your rows of stitches here, that's what you're going to go by as you pick up your stitches. And if you need help, go back to where you started. These 2 threads are the loop for your first stitch. So then this is your second, this is your third, this is your 4th, and this is going to be the 5th. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to knit that stitch. So there's 1, got it folded over, 2, 3, and there's 4. And now I'm right back where I started. All right, now this is where I'm going to put in my counting thread. So I'm going to put my counting thread in here now, and I'm going to start counting my rows before I do my decreases. Now for my size, it says to decrease every 14 rows. I know I want my sleeves to be a wee bit longer than the pattern, so I'm going to decrease every 15 rows. And therefore, when I move my counting thread in and out, I'll move it back every 5 threads. So when I have 3 sets of 5, then I know it's time to do a decrease. This is my middle. I can take that middle out now, that marker. And I'm going to put my needles together like I do for the magic loop. All right, so there my needles are together. These are the stitches I just picked up here. They're in the back. My yarn is between the 2 needles. The needles are pointing to the right. So now I'm going to give this thread of where I started a little tug so it's tighter. So I'm going to pull the front needle down to the tip, the stitches to the tip. I'm going to pull the back needle around. And now don't forget, when I get to where I have my marker, I have to knit those 2 stitches together. So I'm going to do here, 2, 3, 4. I seem to have lost my marker. Huh. Wonder how I did that. Well, at any rate, I know I had 5 stitches and then an extra one. So there's my 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5. Wonder what I do with that marker. Here are the extra stitch and the next stitch. So I'm going to knit those 2 together. And it doesn't matter if you do a knit 2 together or an SSK. But you see how that gives you a nice tight underarm area there.